Hey everyone, welcome to Strange Stories, where we explore near-death experiences and supernatural stories from people who've had a glimpse of the other side. If you enjoy our content, please consider liking the video and subscribing to our channel. Without further ado, let's get to the story of the day. We'd just pulled over to look at the swans at the far end of the lake. For Christmas dinner, we were going to my father's house. I hadn't talked to him in 4 years, and this was supposed to be the reconciliation dinner. My father had been diagnosed with cancer just 3 years after I'd lost my mother to cancer. It was time to let go of the past. With an engagement ring on my finger that I'd just received the day before, we were going to spend Christmas with my father and family. It was 2:46 p.m. at the time. A green and white Dodge truck was approaching the bend. "Oh my God," my fiancé said as he braked hard. The truck had crossed into our lane and collided with the concrete wall on our side of the road. I can still hear the metal scraping against the concrete. I can still see the truck lifting up, and I remember thinking that this was it, that my life was over. The truck would smash through the windshield. I swung around and rolled towards my fiancé. That, according to the doctors, is what saved my life. The airbag exploded and landed on my cheek. It felt like a kiss, I remember thinking. Everything came to a halt, only the hissing of the engine. When my fiancé asked if I was okay, I told him I thought I was. He got out of the truck and motioned for me to do the same. My one leg felt like it was on jello after turning in my seat towards the front of the vehicle. When I went to lift it, nothing happened except a swaying motion. My fiancé was insistent on moving me, but I refused because I suspected something was wrong. Passing motorists had stopped to see if we needed assistance at this point. She stood a good distance away from me, and I extended my hand to ask if she would hold my hand. I then asked her name. She told me, then went to find something to cover my legs. I was dressed up for Christmas dinner. I kept asking her for what was wrong with my leg, and she said it was fine and not to move. I recall the police and fire trucks arriving. I recall the cops asking if I was the driver of the vehicle. That's so funny, now I'm sitting in the passenger seat with obvious injuries. A neighbor brought the cops and firefighters tea and cookies. After all, it was Christmas. It took over an hour for the firemen to remove me from our truck. I joked with them that I didn't care if they were calendar boys as long as they got to work and got me out of the truck. They both laughed. I recall hearing the ambulance sirens approaching. I recall feeling completely helpless while strapped into the spider web. I recalled snow falling on my face as I was being moved to the ambulance. I remember being concerned about my fiancé and how he was doing. I was also concerned about our dog and asked the firemen to place her in the back of the truck so she wouldn't be hit or run away. My fiancé was being examined by ambulance personnel, and after I was placed in the ambulance, he was given a ride to the hospital by the police. The ambulance attendant told me that they usually cut people's hair when removing head strapping, but that, because it was Christmas, he would take his time and remove it without cutting my hair. I recall him asking if I was still attached to my coat. "Yes," I said. They said they wouldn't cut it off me then, but would carefully remove my arms from it because it was Christmas. They wrapped a strap around my legs in the ambulance. I'm sure I screamed. They interrupted because I had a fractured leg and placed a splint on my leg after pulling it. It hurt, but I felt better afterwards. From the firefighters, ambulance attendants, and doctors, I remember hearing several times, "This'll hurt, but it will feel better after." We arrived at Creston Hospital and had x-rays taken. They discovered a fractured femur. They cut my new blouse, but very carefully along the seams because it was Christmas. And they cut the skirt along the seams as well. The skirt was part of a suit my mother had purchased for me on one of our last shopping trips together before she died. At Creston Hospital, I was transferred to another ambulance and driven to Cranbrook Hospital, where a team were waiting to transport me to surgery. The time was 8:10 p.m. I could hear my sisters crying, and I could hear my father's voice breaking as he spoke, telling me he loved me and to hang in there. My sisters held my hands and told me that they loved me, that everything would be fine, and that I should stay strong. This time, my fiancé accompanied us in the ambulance. It was an hour's drive normally, but it had snowed, and it took nearly 2 hours because the roads were slick and visibility was poor. I hoped we wouldn't be in another accident. As I drifted in and out of sleep, my fiancé sat near my head. They had given me something to calm me down, and while I was calm, I was still very aware of my surroundings. As I drifted off, I felt myself transported to a beige world with no bright lights, sounds, or fear. As I stood there, I told myself that I was ready to go and that it was okay because my children knew I loved them. They were in Nanaimo for Christmas with their father. My only regret was the loss of my new life with my fiancé and the fact that I never finished the children's story I'd been working on for my future grandchildren. My mother's voice then told me that she loved me and that it was time for me to return. She warned me that I would be in pain, but that I had to return. As we arrived safely at Cranbrook Hospital, I returned to consciousness. I remember the snow gently falling from the sky under the lights as they were transporting me from the ambulance, and the sky was a twilight blue. It was breathtaking. I recall the snow falling on my eyelashes and wanting to move, but being unable to do so. I stuck my tongue out and caught a snowflake. It was at that point that I decided to fight for my life. I underwent surgery for a femur and tibia plateau fracture discovered on x-rays taken at Cranbrook. I was able to return home after spending 2 months recuperating in a nursing home and another 2 months with my daughter. Returning to this house seemed surreal. When I looked around, I noticed that some Christmas decorations remained. I looked at the wall on my house with fresh eyes, wondering who put this place together. I felt disconnected, different. My goals became extremely important, such as returning to school and walking down the aisle with a cane on August 20th. Both were completed. That is probably why I came across this website. My life has changed, and so have I. My priorities have shifted dramatically. What I thought was important before the accident now appears trivial. This has had an impact on every aspect of my life. I believe for the better. My son claims that he believes I'm from another planet. He claims that I'm unique. My daughter says I'm more enjoyable to be around. My husband and I love each other so much because we both realized how precious life is and how close we came to losing each other. My father, on the other hand, looks at me and says, "I almost lost you, little one." And my mother's voice, "There's more to this story." The swans. A friend had brought me a stereo and some classical music to listen to while I rested. Claire de Lune played as I lay in bed in the first few weeks after surgery. As I remembered, I gasped for air. My mother requested that Claire Ledune be played at her funeral service. I remember her comforting me as we talked about it, saying that she will always protect and comfort me like a swan on the lake by wrapping her wings around me. Do I wish this had never happened to me? I'm left wondering, what have you learned from your experience? Aside from the physical aspects, it was a fantastic experience. It was spiritual, and it has been and continues to be a growing experience for me as I struggle to find the balance between my previous life and the life I am now. I like the life I'm living right now. I hope that stays with me forever. I do, however, feel a little disconnected from others at times.